This podcast is brought to you by Kion Aminos and all Kion products. Watch the video at the end of the podcast for more details.
Welcome to the Deepak Saini Show.
What do you need to know about peptides? Welcome to the Deepak Saini Show. I'd like to thank J23 for her intro music. You can find a link to her music in the show description. So there's been a lot about peptides just blown up over the last 18 months, maybe 2 years. Tons of noise, tons of marketing, and people are asking me questions. So let's dig into it. First, I want to start about talking about my peptide story. So I first heard about peptides in, 2017, 2018, late 2019, right as we're just kind of heading into COVID. I decided I want to get peptides. I want to use them, specifically BPC 157, which I'll talk more about that in a bit, for my back injury that I used to have, just for a maintenance point of view. So back then, let's call it late 2019, early 2020, around there, very, very hard to source peptides, specifically here in Canada where I live, but generally, but certainly in Canada, it was very sketchy. Now, peptides are certainly legal in some places, are definitely illegal in other places, and in most places, it's kind of this gray area here. And I'll talk about the legal landscape in a little bit. But it was very, very difficult to get some. And we're trying to find some, and people would only, because of that legality issue, a lot of companies couldn't get payment processors to cover them, so they'd only accept payment in crypto. And I'm like, I'm not paying in crypto. Like, that just seems shady. Anyway, long story short, me and my friend were able to buy some BPC 157. We used it. It worked fine. It was a powder, came as a vial, and then you have to get water, right kind of water, and reconstitute it, pull it up into a big syringe, make sure there's no air bubbles, so you're not injecting air in, even though you're doing subcutaneous. Still, there's a few safety things you have to be mindful of, alcohol swab, disinfecting, all these kind of things, knowing the right dose, how much water, there's a little bit of chemistry involved. Not a ton, not super complicated, but a little bit extra you have to know so you don't hurt yourself. Anyway, it worked fine. It was just kind of a weird situation. I didn't want to do it again. So stepped away from peptides for a while. Fast forward to maybe 5-6 months ago, I'm like, I really want to introduce peptides back in for my own personal use. Plus, clients are asking me, friends are asking me, and I'm seeing all this BS online. So I'm like, you know what? I need to do a deep dive. So about 3-4 months ago, I just did a deep dive, and for two things I was looking for. One, quality sourcing, because quality sourcing always matters for everything. Everything in your life, you should get the best quality that you can afford. And certainly when it comes to things you're ingesting or putting into your body, or on your body for that matter as well, you want the highest quality. That goes with your supplements, everything that goes with your peptides. So I wanted quality sourcing, and also a delivery mechanism. And there's essentially 3 ways, really 4. One is nasal. There's certain peptides that you can do nasal spray. They're specifically for brain health. That goes right, through the blood-brain barrier, very thin layer through the nostrils to the brain. I'll put that one aside because that's a very limited use case. There's, like I said, a powder that you have to reconstitute in water, draw into a syringe and then inject yourself. There's pills, which have their own problems, which I'll get to later. And then there is insulin pens. So I'll get to that in a second as well. All right, now before we really get into the meat of it and talking about some of the peptides, I think peptides are a tool that we use on top of everything else. So obviously we want the basics. We want proper nutrition and movement and stress reduction, and breathing properly, sleeping properly, getting outside in sunshine. These are all the fundamentals, right? Then we can add advanced testing, right? DNA, that's what I talked about in my last Solosode, metabolites testing, microbiome testing, advanced blood work, hormone testing, all these things. These are things that we should be doing to really optimize our health. And then once we have that data and we know where we're struggling or where, where we can use a little extra support. Only then do peptides play a role, right? They're a tool on top. So that being said, so first you want to, your DNA tells you your blueprint, your microbiome gives you the ecosystem, metabolites tell you, what's actually working for you. That's kind of like your real health dashboard. And then peptides on top. And again, peptides, they're not a magic bullet. They're not going to solve all your problems, but they can definitely help here. So a lot of people think like, oh, peptides, it's like the new Ozempic, it's new TRT, the new anti-aging miracle. Again, the buzz is loud, the marketing is even louder. So let's really get into it. Again, it's the next level tool. So let me share this. So yeah, I already kind of touched on this bit, but like the science is like way ahead of the regulation. Okay, so again, different regulations, different rules. There's a legitimate medical pathway. There's a gray market, a lot of noise in between. And quite honestly, there and where I live, a lot of places, and actually most of the U.S., a little bit further advanced in Canada, a lot of use cases in Canada. It's really just still a gray market. Now, that doesn't mean you can't use them. That doesn't mean you can't get them. It's that gray market. Think about like, where marijuana was a few years ago, where psychedelics were a few years ago. That's kind of the landscape we're in right now. And happy to answer any questions that some of you might have after you watch this. So what is a peptide? So simple. Peptides are short chains of amino acids, anywhere from 2 to 50 amino acids arranged properly. Your body already makes peptides. Your body makes over 7,000 or about 7,000 peptides already endogenously in your body. Just when we get to a certain age, or maybe because of other, lifestyle choices, that signaling turns off, starts to get weaker. And again, they are natural. They are biological signaling molecules. They're, the messengers between our cells. And you can inject them, and they go where the body needs repair. You don't aim them; they aim themselves. Now, if you have a little, elbow something here and whatever, yeah, you can, let's say BPC 157, for example, you can inject it right there, close to site. That's great, or back, or wherever the case may be. But it will work systemically. It knows where to go. So whether it's repairing tissue, burning fat, making more of this or that hormone, reducing inflammation, building this neuron, it does what it needs to do. So, and here's, why they're so powerful and why many people are excited about them, why I'm excited about them, not only for myself, but for my clients as well. They're highly specific. They target one defined pathway, not a shotgun blast, trying to like affect the whole system. There's a lower systemic burden than pharmaceuticals, fewer side effects. Actually, there's not really any side effects with using peptides. And they work with your natural biology, not against it. Again, you make them yourself. You're making over 7,000 of them. We're not introducing something foreign when you're using peptides. We're reinforcing a system that's already running. Again, they're restorative tools, not suppression tools like pharmaceuticals are. There's a few different categories of peptides. So there's it could be classified into like brain and neuroprotection, metabolic health and fat loss, longevity and cellular repair, injury recovery and tissue regeneration, hormone optimization, sleep and nervous system support, and even sexual health. So I went through a bunch of those there. Probably all of you listening are going to be like, yep, at least one of those categories I could use some help with, maybe two, maybe all of them. One example, there's a peptide called DSIP. It supports your body's natural melatonin production, helps you actually hit deep sleep. Why does this matter? Helps you hit deep REM sleep. REM sleep is when your pituitary releases growth hormone, which is your body's master repair signal. So no sleep, no repair. And let's be honest, many people are not sleeping well, might be talking to you right now. Another very, very powerful thing when it comes to peptides is stacking them. Strategic combinations of peptides that hit multiple pathways at once, and they're designed for very specific health goals. As an example, so for brain and focus or neurocognitive, right? You could stack Cmax plus NAD plus, and even maybe SS31. So you get cognition, mitochondrial protection in your neurons, long-term brain resilience. This is very exciting for entrepreneurs or people that like very high-performing type of jobs, corporate executives, etc. Another one could be for metabolic and fat loss. using Retatrutide and MotC. So again, multiple pathway, appetite, insulin regulation, mitochondrial fat burning at the cellular level, targeted fat metabolism, without having the muscle loss. That's the problem with like Ozempic and other GLP-1s. This type of stack, for body composition that actually holds. So it's not just, you're not just dropping weight on the scale, but you're actually reshaping how your body uses energy. Another stack could be a longevity stack, so using NAD plus epitalon, or maybe even S31. Again, DNA repair, telomere stabilization, mitochondrial protection, kind of anti-aging at the cellular level. So it's very, a lot of older people or, kind of anti-aging type of people are using that. Here's probably the one for most use case for most people, and certainly one I'm using is an injury recovery stack. So BPC 157, you could add TB 500 to that. You can use GHK Q, that's a copper peptide. It's collagen repair, tissue regeneration, inflammation control. So if you got the nagging injuries, the old shoulder, the bad knee, the recurring back stuff, this is the stack for you. This is something I'm certainly, that's what I used before back in 2019, 2020 is I was using BPC 157, and I'm going to talk about at the end here my current protocol, my current experiment that I'm running on myself. Yeah, I want to talk about Tune specifically here. So I mentioned Retatrutide when it comes to sort of the body composition fat loss one. So again, we've all heard of Ozempic or other GLP-1s. Again, this hits one receptor. It tells your brain you're full. Retatrutide hits three. So it's a GLP-1 for appetite, a GIP for insulin sensitivity, and glucagon for fat metabolism. The reason this matters, and especially for women, matters for everyone, but especially for women, single receptor GLP-1s eat your muscle mass along with the fat. Retatrutide's third pathway protects the lean muscle while you lose fat. That's why it's way safer and one that I would recommend for people. Again, it's not the magic pill. You need to do the exercise, you need to eat properly, you need to control your inflammation. But again, it can be another tool that you throw on top to change your body composition to lose weight. Also is being seen clinically now with perimenopausal and menopausal women, Retatrutide, not only for like the body composition point of view of then losing the weight that many women tend to put on during that stage, but hormone regulation, metabolic recalibration, mood stabilization, and bringing inflammation down as well. So certainly if you're a woman in your 50s or 60s, sitting here wondering why nothing feels the way it used to, it's a conversation worth having. And if you're a guy, you probably, have a wife or partner who's in that season of their life, you want to pay attention to that as well. It's the kind of tool that gives women, it's not just about the gene size, it's about giving, your energy back and your life back. That's why it's a very powerful peptide. Now I want to share this one too, MotC. This is a mitochondrial derived peptide, which is a fancy way of saying it works on the energy production level of every cell in your body. So why am I signaling this out specifically? Many people, I probably know half a dozen people in my life right now who are still struggling with long COVID. You might know someone as well. People that haven't, since 2020, 21, 22, struggling with it, fatigue that doesn't lift, brain fog that never goes away, recovery times that doubled, or they just don't have the energy. So MotC is a very promising tool in this population because long COVID is fundamentally a mitochondrial issue, and MotC works exactly where the damage lives, right? Your cells, here's a crazy thing people sometimes don't understand. Your cells are designed to hoard energy. They're conservative by nature. MotC basically tells your mitochondria, stop hoarding, start spending. That's why people report having more energy. Where energy is literally being released. They have more energy, they have more clarity than they felt for years, back to like before they got COVID. Now, here's the big warning. Here's the red flag, danger, Will Robinson. Most peptides on the market are a problem. And this is very important. So I'm going to be completely transparent, honest with you here. As I mentioned, when I bought way back when, it came as a powder. You have to reconstitute it yourself and all the things I already mentioned, a little bit sketchy. Oftentimes the purity is 60, 75%. There's more opportunity for contamination to happen. Again, oxidation begins immediately. Like as soon as you're breaking the seal on that vial with the powder, you're introducing oxidation. And then once you mix it in the water, stability lasts, you're maybe getting 10 or 14 days. So depending on your protocol and the peptide you're using, you might be on a month protocol, but like halfway through or less than halfway through, your peptides degrading. It's degrading immediately through the oxidation, and by halfway through your protocol, you don't even have the same thing that you think you're using anymore because it's degraded so much. Potential for inconsistent dosing, inconsistent results. You really have to know what you're doing. It's not super complicated, but you have to know what you're doing. Now, oral peptides, which is what most of you have seen, which probably if you're using peptides, this is what you've seen. Or you're using yourself. You can't scroll on social media more than a couple pages or a couple swipes without getting peptides being promoted to you. And BPC 157 is probably one of the biggest ones. Now, oral peptides have been tested, and you're getting anywhere from 20 to 50% efficacy as the stomach acid destroys most of it. You're not getting the benefit of most of it. Some people are a little bit on the more conservative side would say even like 5 or 10% only. So anyway, long story short, it's a big waste of money. Taking oral peptides, you are not getting what you think you're getting. It's not a good bang for your buck, that's for sure. That's why most people have an underwhelming experience. They're not getting what they paid for. Now, the peptides I personally use now, not back then, but what I use now is a little bit different, and this matters. So the peptides I use, and then again, it goes back to what I said earlier about sourcing. Sourcing is very important, and then delivery mechanism. So we go to sourcing. You want to look for, company that's, GMP certified. The one that I'm choosing to go with, they have a lab in Europe, so they're has higher standards there. So GMP certified in European facility. EMA regulated tissue bank, 99% purity, batch tested for identity, sterility, concentration. And they do the due diligence. You have to do your due diligence. See third-party certifications, third-party audits, these sorts of things. Now, the thing that I like about the company that I found and the lab that they ultimately purchased from is, and a lot of people are getting them, or doctors are getting peptides from compounding pharmacies, right? Great. The lab actually produces the peptides and sells them to the compounding pharmacies. So a lot of the peptides that you're getting is coming from, the compounding pharmacy is getting, the raw material from, these labs that are creating it. And, the one that I've chosen to use myself personally, they are providing to the compounding pharmacies. But here's the key thing: to the consumer, the direct to consumer, you're not getting a watered down, consumer version. You're getting the same efficacy, potency, purity that the compounding pharmacies are getting. That's why I love that. And here's the other thing. So again, I talked about delivery mechanism. So here's a sample one here. It is I prefer, I think it's easier for a number of reasons, is a pre-loaded injectable pen, just like an insulin pen, right? So depending on the peptide you're dosing, whatever, like you just click. I don't know if you can hear that, how many units you need, right? Take it off, right? Very, very thin. I don't know if you can see the very thin insulin pen. You're injecting this subcutaneously, and then you just push it down until you get the dose into you. Very easy. And here's the really important part: the manufacturing process is closed loop, so there's no oxidation. No oxygen is introduced to the material anywhere in the process. So you're getting purity here, and this is shelf stable for up to 2 years. And I mean, you can put it in the fridge if you want, and a lot of people recommend that. I mean, if you're using it, I don't think you need to, but shelf stable for 2 years. So that's what you need to look like. That's in everything. Let's take a again, broader picture. When you're talking about supplements, any testing you're going to do, DNA testing, microbiome, et cetera, you want work with companies, work with products that are on the cutting edge that have good quality, and that certainly transcends to your peptides as well. And again, so yeah, it's like no mixing, no contamination risk, no oxidation, anything like that. Very, very important. And that's the difference between like research grade backyard chemistry and pharmaceutical grade medicine, right? You want quality. You're injecting this into your body. It's very important to you. Now, people ask me sometimes, okay, great. Well, what's the side effect? There's a side effect to everything, because we're used to the pharmaceutical model there, where there's like side effects are longer than the things it's supposed to fix. I want to push back on that language. There aren't side effects. There's only effects. Peptides reinforce what your body already does. You're not introducing anything foreign. You're already producing these 7,000 peptides. So the 1, 2, 3, whatever peptides you choose to use, your body's already used to it. You're just sending a signal to jumpstart things a little bit. These peptides aren't foreign. They're already you, just amplified. What else did I want to say here? Yeah, so again, I just want to go back to, the fundamentals, fundamentals of health: nutrition, movement, sleep, water, meditation, stress reduction, all these things, fundamentals. Testing, another layer on top. Know what your numbers actually are. Where are you actually deficient? Then you can make targeted supplementation choices, targeted interventions based on knowing your numbers with advanced testing, well beyond what your GP is ever testing for you. And then another layer on top, amongst other things, but peptides can be that next layer tool to identify and help you with certain things. So I know many people are just going to run out and run out and get peptides. I will have a link for the source that I use, so you can use them. But again, I would suggest, yeah, you can go do that, but I would suggest have a conversation. You need to look at a bigger picture. I think it's that important. Your health is important. Your health is the most important thing. So look at the bigger picture. And if you don't have advanced testing done, you should I would recommend you do that, but we can have that conversation. So reach out to me. I think peptides are like, they're not new, but they're getting a lot more noise. And I think we need to make smart decisions. I want you to make smart decisions, and I'll leave it with that. So have any questions about peptides, reach out to me. I want to thank our show sponsor today for supporting our podcast. And don't forget to check out J23. She's going to play us out with some music. Check out her music in the show notes. And remember, exceptional results for the exceptional you. Until next time. This podcast was sponsored by Kion and Kion Aminos in particular. This is my favorite post-workout thing to do. People are always talking about you need more protein. Super important, especially as we age, as we're trying to maintain our lean muscle mass. Super important for both men and women. And essentially protein, that chicken, those eggs, whatever you're taking, breaks down into amino acids, which is what our body actually needs, what our muscle tissues actually uses. And essential amino acids, which these are, is what your body cannot produce, but they are essential for you. So you need to get them from food. And as with many other things, we're not getting the same nutrients anymore from our foods. And certainly if we're not eating the right protein sources, we're not getting our essential amino acids. So I love the Kion brand, number one, because they stay on top of the research. They are always reiterating their formula when new research comes out, and they're tweaking it. I think they've tweaked it 2 or 3 times already. So I love that about a brand. I use this myself to build lean muscle mass and maintain my muscle mass as I'm aging. So use the coupon code there to get 10% off of not only the essential amino acids, but all Kion products as well.
Podcast produced by the Minted Green Company